Plead my cause, O Lord, with them that strive with me, fight against them that fight against me. Take hold of shield and buckler, and stand up for mine help. Draw out also the spear, and stop the way against them that persecute me. Say unto my soul, I am thy salvation. This psalm has been well known since the days of the early church as a poem about the suffering of the Messiah. Here, the existence called the first person refers to the Messiah Jesus, who will come to this earth in a physical body in the future and die by shedding blood on the cross. Also, today's text is in the form of a prayer, but in that the prayer of the Messiah Jesus, that is, God the Son, is surely realized and fulfilled, it is perhaps closer to a future prophetic proclamation rather than a prayer. In other words, the Messiah Jesus is using the form of a prayer to proclaim the work of salvation that he will perform when he comes to this earth in the future. In other words, when Jesus himself comes to this earth in the future and proceeds with the work of salvation, the adversaries will rise up and oppose, ignore, and despise him. No, not only will they interfere with and obstruct the work of salvation, but furthermore, they will engage in arguments, strive, and persecute. However, God himself will strive and fight against those who strive with and persecute the Messiah Jesus. In other words, opposing, striving with, and persecuting the Messiah Jesus is the same as striving and fighting with God who sent the Messiah Jesus. Anyway, God will not only send the Messiah Jesus to this earth, but he will be with him in his ministry, and he will personally strive and fight against those who oppose the Messiah Jesus. Take hold of shield and buckler, and stand up for mine help. Here, take hold of shield and buckler represents God guarding and protecting the Messiah Jesus from his adversaries. In other words, God does not just send the Messiah Jesus to this earth and leave him alone, but he himself will guard and protect the Messiah Jesus, as well as help and be with him in his ministry. In other words, the work of salvation of the Messiah Jesus is a ministry that God is with, and furthermore, it is a ministry that God himself performs sovereignly. In other words, God does not just leave the Messiah Jesus to proceed with the ministry alone, but he himself will guard, protect, help, and be with him. Draw out also the spear, and stop the way against them that persecute me. Say unto my soul, I am thy salvation. Here, draw out the spear represents God actively dealing with the interference and obstruction of the adversaries with his great power. Also, here, those who persecute me refers to those adversaries who follow the Messiah Jesus to find weaknesses or flaws, or to harm his life. Also, here, say unto my soul, I am thy salvation represents that God will surely save him from that strife and persecution. In other words, this word is saying that God will block all the plans, intentions, and schemes of the adversaries who interfere with and obstruct the work of salvation of the Messiah Jesus, and furthermore, he will even save the life of the Messiah Jesus.